For Labor Day weekend, you have found the Georgia Gang. And topping our agenda today at City Hall in Atlanta, it's Target Reed. The Atlanta Hawks have a new farmhouse, and he's back. Yes, Victor Hill is back. Some of the stories up for grabs on the Georgia Gang.
From the Fox 5 studios, the Georgia Gang starts now.
And we're glad you could be with us on this first Sunday in September and Labor Day weekend. The subject line doesn't change. We're back to corruption at Atlanta City Hall. We have with us today Carrie Victor sitting in for Theron Johnson, and it's good that you're an attorney because I'm going right to you. It seems to me that this week's subpoenas from the U.S. Attorney at Kasim Reed and his office at City Hall, all the travel records, the expense accounts, the purchasing cards, this is a frontal assault on the mayor. It's no longer just City Hall corruption.
So it would appear. Last week, a subpoena, which I have a copy of here, was issued to the city of Atlanta, and it was looking for records that cover the entire 8-year term of Kasim Reed. It is directed at all members of his administration. It seeks information concerning P cards, travel records, payment records for a full 8 years, and the apparent belief is that the Reed administration and the folks who were part of it were living lavishly off of these P cards, and the subpoena extends to everybody in the mayor's cabinet. So apparently the prosecutors who are investigating this have a pretty clear idea of what they're going after and who they're going after, and this seems like the latest shoe to drop, and it's a big one.
And Phil, you know, we already knew from published reports that Kasim Reed himself in 3 years put $390,000 on his credit card. I think that's the amount. And his chief of staff, Candace Bird, had a similar amount. But now we're going beyond the 3 years to 8 years. And I think Carrie's right. I think now it's starting to come into focus for me that perhaps Kasim Reed and his staff were leading an Exxon-like lifestyle, not a City Hall-like lifestyle.
Well, and we've talked about this on the broadcast the last couple of years. Just that South Africa trip was an extravagant waste of taxpayer money. In fact, what's come into focus, as you all are outlining, is the fact that the corruption and the bribery is bad enough, which the feds are investigating, but the waste of taxpayer money is actually perhaps just as bad.
Well, I think, though, that...
And you said the word. I think you've used it. There's an arrogance about it, the way the taxpayer money's been spent.
Well, I think that, yes, but I also think that part of it, the investigation started off as looking at contracts and city contracts regarding the airport primarily, and now it has veered into the operations in the mayor's office. And I'm not sure, but I think the administration was doing good work, but they maybe have indulged themselves while they were doing it. So that's the problem.
One of the things that we hear, though, our friend Lester Tate, the former president of the State Bar of Georgia, said when interviewed on this subject recently that anytime that you know about 9 different subpoenas out there, there are 10 times that many that are actually out there that you don't know about. So we just know about the tip of the iceberg. This investigation involves far more than we're even aware of.
Well, and I think you're right about the lavishness, because we've got the former CFO, Jim Beard, that was a $14,000 hotel room in Paris.
That's right. He was looking at furniture. Right. That's one of the lamest excuses. And of course, as we have talked about, U.S. Attorney B.J. Pack.
By the way, is that a crime? I didn't mean to interrupt you, Phil, but is lavish spending a crime?
Well, if it's taxpayers' money that's wasted, and if they're lying about what the intent of the expense is, yes. But what I was about to say is that this is why U.S. Attorney B.J. Pack has brought on more FBI agents and more prosecutors, to your point, Carrie.
Well, you know, go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think part of the problem was the doing things without clearing them in front. If they had gotten some clearance, they wouldn't have done it, because they would have been told you can't do that.
That's right.
Well, the CFO Beard, as you read, he said, well, I did it, I just went along with it because the mayor wanted it. What, did you see that?
Well,
that's ridiculous.
That was the second piece of bad news for City Hall this week. I don't know how Keisha Lance Bottoms gets anything done. She's inherited this mess. But the second piece of bad news was a third report saying that the bonuses paid by the Kasim Reed administration as he went out the door were illegal, and violated the Georgia gratuities clause. And that was $900,000. So we're talking about almost $1 million in taxpayer funds paid out illegal. Some of it was reimbursed, some of it was paid back. Dale Russell on the I-Team had video I hadn't seen of a party for city employees, rank and file. Boy, it looked like Mardi Gras and New Year's Eve rolled into one, and they were the $2,000 bonuses and prizes, they called them.
Right.
2,000 here, 1,000 there, 500 there, and people going nuts. I would have been too.
Well, this shines the spotlight too on Atlanta City Council. It's obvious that they were so weak as a kitten over the last 8 years. They didn't have controls, as you were pointing out, Alexis, that they should have had. There's a lot of new city council people. I hope this is a baptism under fire, that city council and some of the veterans need to take more control over this spending.
Well, this
I sense
this
they
week,
are.
Yeah, this week President Felicia Moore introduced legislation to create a compliance.
And that was a great
position.
thing. That's right. I agree with you, Alexis. But we cannot have any more of these verbal reports on spending, which Keisha Lance Bottoms okayed just a few weeks ago. That we need to have written reports in light of this waste and corruption.
And one of the things that the report talks about that was just issued is the fact that the folks who were making these bonus payments were strategizing to do workarounds on internal procedures that were intended to stop this sort of thing from happening. And this should be sort of a hint for government workers on a going forward basis. If you're having to work around internal guidelines to do what you're doing, it's probably illegal. Don't do it.
Or at least not a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, and one more, I've mentioned this before, but it still bothers me. The bonuses were, to use the City Hall term, grossed up. In other words, if you got $15,000, they gave you another $6,000, which was to help you pay your taxes. Now, in the eyes of the IRS, that's not logical to me. That's another $6,000 in income, isn't it?
Of course.
It is.
So you now owe taxes on $21,000.
Right.
That doesn't stop.
You never catch up.
Yeah.
You never catch up. So this grossing up business is a sham, isn't it?
It is.
Well, it's not a sham, but it was.
It's real. It's real money.
It's real money.
It's
right.
taxable money, you would
Yes,
agree.
that's what I'm saying. So they're paying taxes on it, but they know they're going to have this amount of money in their pockets. So, I mean, that's why they did it.
Yeah.
But it is.
It's disgraceful.
Well, Felicia Moore is on TV more than, I mean, she's the one who's sort of having to be the bulwark as
Well,
city
and
council
the city
president.
council president is a great leader for reform. I'm glad we have her.
We don't have time to discuss this in any great detail, but I'm seeing some troubling signs out of Marta. We had another Marta executive pleading to theft, six-figure variety. And we had a couple of reports saying that Marta isn't ready for prime time, that they're not geared up to spend the $2.5 billion that could be coming. So I think, really, it was kind of odd to read those reports because Marta really hadn't built anything in 40 years, right?
That's right.
It's been a long time.
Well, it was a damaging report, especially since you've got counties like Gwinnett and Cobb thinking about doing transit, and rightly so. They should be thinking about it with the population increase. But these, again, you had internal procedures that weren't being followed in Marta. That it's pretty shocking.
Well, their last big rail project apparently was completed in 2000, so it's hardly surprising that they're not ready for huge capital projects at this time. So they did a 2015 report. It identified 40 targeted different areas that they needed to address. Within a year, they'd only addressed 40% of those. A year later, there were still a number of things that had to be done. They're not ready for a huge capital project right now.
All right. Well,
They better get ready.
Yeah. When we come back, we're going to look at some more positive news. The economy continues to hum, and Metro Atlanta is a perfect example of it. And the Hawks have a new name for their arena. It's a farmhouse. We'll be back.
Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
And don't forget to join us on Facebook and YouTube. Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms has good news to celebrate. Kind of gets overshadowed by all that we talked about in the first segment. But Starbucks moving a regional headquarters, it's not really a regional headquarters, but it's 500 jobs into Midtown.
Right, and it's a good thing. And we can thank the Starbucks COO?
Right.
Rosalind,
Not Bentley.
No, I've lost her name.
I mean, she's a Spelman graduate.
She's a Spelman graduate, Spelman Board of Trustees, and was working here as the head of at Walmart before she joined Starbucks. So she wants to stay in Atlanta.
Good for her. And
Which
Phil,
is a good thing.
Up your
Rosalind
way,
Brewer, excuse me.
Rosalind Brewer, and Bentley. That's somebody else.
Right.
Brewer, you're right. Up your way, 1,100 jobs coming to Sandy Springs in the form of Inspire Brands. That's a fast food company.
That's right.
Can you handle the traffic, Phil?
We can handle it. We are doing a lot of infrastructure as a city, and I think it's interesting to note that Sandy Springs has just as many Fortune 500 companies now as the city of Atlanta. So jobs are out there. You mentioned earlier the booming economy with President Trump getting a lot of credit. In my opinion, we saw the numbers on the gross domestic product that the naysayers are very quiet today.
Well, if they could just get the wages up, then we'll really be excited.
You know what? There are more jobs than ever. There are wages in various areas that are up if you look at the reports. But I think it's a wonderful boom time for Metro Atlanta and hopefully other parts of the state of Georgia. I am a little worried about crime. I don't know if you want to talk about it on the broadcast today, but we're having a serious crime problem in the city of Atlanta with the murder rate up and with the shootings up this year.
Well, I didn't really want to go there, but let's mention it. I saw some disturbing footage on Fox 5 of teenagers run amok at the Target in Buckhead, across the street from Phipps Plaza, and they rode their scooters in, motorized scooters, and drove all around the store and tore stuff up and threw it around. It's a new form of urban terrorism.
There's a case of where we're 700 men short on the Atlanta Police Department, and that's got to be fixed.
But continuing with the good economic news, so Phil, you mentioned Fortune 500 companies in Sandy Springs. Now, if you take my side of it, that's Dunwoody, and look at the perimeter center of Sandy Springs and Dunwoody, it's the largest collection of Fortune 500 companies in the southeastern United States. And one of them, State Farm Insurance on the Dunwoody side, has now spent a bunch, Carrie, on the naming rights for the former Phillips Arena.
It's a 20-year deal, and it is now going to be State Farm Arena. And I'm hoping that they'll issue a policy that ensures us against another 50 years of the Hawks going without a championship.
I wish they could ensure the victories, that's right. And around the metro area, a couple of little things, really. We talked last week about the Beaufort school superintendent, Guy Hamby, who went crazy on tape with racial slurs and so forth, and he resigned or was let go, whatever, Monday night by the Beaufort School Board. And they went ahead and named a new interim.
Joy Davis.
Okay, is that her name? Brought her out of retirement, I believe.
Yes.
She'll be the interim superintendent. And in Clayton County, he's back. Victor Hill. What can you do without walking small? Victor Hill this past week, well, the week before he had the wife of a campaign opponent arrested. This week he had the campaign opponent arrested. Victor Hill does not do anything that isn't splashy. We can see.
Or overly dramatic.
Yes, I mean, when Victor Hill doesn't give out traffic tickets, he puts people under arrest, Bill.
Well, I've always maintained that he's a disgrace to the badge, and you talk about Robert Hawes, who was announced as an opponent, a former deputy. Hawes was accused, and I don't know who was right or wrong, but he was accused of this back in of November 2017 of giving false information. Well, how come it took until now for all of a sudden Victor Hill to get worried about that?
It took until his campaign announcement.
That's right. That's right. And then went after his wife, who was criticizing Hill on social media. So this stinks to high heaven.
Someday they're going to make a movie about Victor Hill, and not in a good way. It's going to be reminiscent of the last, I think it was the last emperor of Scotland, about Idi Amin.
Right.
And if you don't know who that is, look it up.
Or it might be based on Donald Trump.
Well, I was going to harken back to Douglas County in the 1970s. We had a sheriff by the name of Earl Lee who had a penchant for putting his political opponents in jail, and it sounds like we're going back to the 1970s.
And Earl Lee also had a penchant for using his pistol.
Yep, I remember that as well.
I can tell you that. All right, when we come back, we're going to start to get up to speed on the governor's race, which is just 2 months away. Stay with us.
Have a question or comment for the Georgia Gang? Visit their website at fox5atlanta.com.
Now let's get to politics. We went through that long primary and runoff, and we've all kind of relaxed, but we have a general election in November, just a couple of months away. And traditionally, these races don't kick off until after Labor Day, but I noticed a movement this week, Phil. Ryan Kemp has new commercials, Stacey Abrams has new commercials, and issues are starting to form. For example, Stacey Abrams came back wanting to remove the carvings from Stone Mountain. At least I think that's what she said.
She
in
did
an
say
interview
that.
in Columbus.
Yes.
Right.
She did say that. However, she also said that she did a wonderful interview with the Columbus Ledger. Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's
That is correct.
That's it.
And she said that her personal position was that she did not want to have public tax dollars supporting memorials or celebrations of the Confederacy, which...
She did say that, but what's shocking, and I thought she'd pivot more to be a moderate on this, she said she's totally opposed to all of these memorials and wants them gone. And I don't think that's a very reasonable position. Even many prominent African-American leaders, Michael Thurman, for example, said, you know, let's keep these memorials, especially to the dead, but put them in some historical context. That makes more sense.
Well, I think that what she said when questioned more about it was that she was willing to have a conversation about it.
Right.
And so that, I think
well, how
she
can
is...
you have a conversation when
Well,
your bottom line is you want to remove everything?
But she said you have to have a position to start from. And she wants people to know that's what she thinks.
Well, I think she should have pivoted to other positions that might have been more reasonable, don't you?
Well, if you have a conversation with someone, perhaps you will change your original position. And I think that's what she was implying.
And Kerry, for his part, Brian Kemp is saying, look, we've got to learn to live with the past and understand it. To me, which seems real simple.
I think they're both right. I think that you need to have a conversation, but as Mr. Kemp says, you don't learn from the past by obliterating it. What we need to fix the problem rather than fixing fault. And one way that you do that is try to understand the past. White Southerners need to understand how African Americans react to seeing memorials to the Confederacy. And I understand that they're upset by that. On the other hand, everybody who likes the idea of tearing these down needs to understand the historical context in which all this had happened. In the 1860s, people who were citizens of the country identified more as citizens of their states. Their allegiances went to their states. And when a state went to the Confederacy, they naturally went with their state. But if you study, for example, Robert E. Lee, you will find he was an opponent of slavery.
Well, also, these memorials were done in the 20th century. They were done in the beginning of 1900s as a message to say the South will rise again and Negroes stay in your place.
Isn't it possible, too, they were also honoring Confederate war dead?
Yes.
Those who survived?
Yes, but those were people who were seen as traitors, secessionists.
Everyone ought to be able to honor their ancestors regardless.
Absolutely, and they should be put into context. Many people have said not destroy them, but put them in context.
But that's not what Stacey Abrams is. I'm glad you're saying that, but that's not what Stacey Abrams is saying. She's taking a more radical, tear them down like the barbarians would.
She didn't say tear them down. She said remove them.
Well, that's the same thing.
Now,
that's this particular thing at Stone Mountain, but I think that she's willing to have the conversation. She did say that. And Brian Kemp, he's not saying anything. We don't know where he stands.
Well, he's saying keep him.
He's saying
put him
keep
in
them and put him in
context
historical context, which is
well,
a very reasonable...
that requires a change in the law in the state legislature. And
Well, I agree.
Kemp made another move this week.
which was done, I'm sorry, in response to changing the flag, taking the Confederate symbol off of the state flag. They then wrote in legislation, well, you can't bother with any of these monuments.
Right.
So now, but how are you going to put them in context if you cannot?
Well, it's because democratic elections occur every 2 and 4 years, and if you want to change things, you have to change your state legislature in this case. So do it that way rather than trying to whip up a base by calling for the destruction of monuments.
Well, we'll see what happens.
Let's change the subject a little bit, but stay in the governor's race. I think there was a very important move this week by Brian Kemp, where he said that he would support wholeheartedly a Religious Freedom Act, RFRA as it's called. We've been debating it for 3 years down at the state capitol. He said he would support that only if it were modeled on the federal statute passed into law under Bill Clinton in 1993 and voted on in Congress by Nathan Deal. But no expansion beyond that. Is that a position that will satisfy the conservative right? I'm
Well,
okay with it.
I'll take a stab at it. I think it's a reasonable move. I think it might reassure elements of the business community. And I mean, what, a dozen or so other states have RFRAs, and they're doing fine. And I think that it hopefully, now the hard left will never be satisfied with whatever is said about RFRA, but I think it's a reasonable position.
What we also need to remember is that the Supreme Court has talked about what your constitutional rights are in regard to expressing your religious beliefs in the context of the whole gay rights debate and gay marriage and all that sort of thing. And you do have a First Amendment right to refuse to, for example, participate in advance ceremonies or give some sort of artistic contribution to, for example, a wedding, a same-sex wedding. And you know, as long as we have that constitutional right that is protected by the First Amendment, I don't think that the states need to act. I don't think Georgia needs to act. We're already protected by what's embodied in the First Amendment.
And also the national RFRA amendment that was passed. I mean, it just, to pursue it means, I think, to endorse the fact that you really want to discriminate against people that don't believe what you believe.
And you're going to shoot yourself in the foot economically.
Well, Carrie, as I understand it, there was a court decision whereby the states felt they had to strengthen their own protections, and that the Supreme Court still ultimately must decide. I mean, I agree with what you just said, but the states are still concerned that they don't have the authority, and that's why they went ahead and did it.
Well, the law is evolving here, so let it evolve. Let's see where we land, and let's not shoot ourselves in the foot in the meantime.
I can't go with you on that. Let me tell you, as you know, I'm Catholic, and we went through that whole adoption fight in the General Assembly. And Phil, heavily Catholic, Buffalo, New York, right?
Right.
The Catholic Church has stopped the adoption business because of similar legislation to what Georgia has.
Right.
So you've taken the main provider of adoption out of the game in western upstate New York.
Well, it's a great example of why the states, a lot of them want to have some protections. And it is evolving. But for right now, I'm with the state legislatures trying to protect these freedoms.
All right, we got to get out. We didn't get to Sarah Amico, who turns out is more than a trucking company executive, the Democrat nominee for lieutenant governor. Oh, she's a former Hollywood agent.
And she's got a lot of money. She's going to make herself very competitive against Republican Jeff Duncan in the lieutenant governor's race.
60% of her money from out of state. We've heard that one before.
Well, and so we'll look and see how much comes out of state on the Republican Party side, too. They're getting quite a bit
not so sure, not percentages like that. All right, when we come back, we will look up this week's winners and losers.
Time now for the week's winners and losers.
And of course, we're all winners because college football is back, but that's just me. Maybe you too.
Yes.
Carrie, let's begin with you on winners and losers.
I never thought I'd say this, but this week the Pope is a loser. He's been identified as one of the people who was complicit in covering up what has been going on with sex abuse in the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church is on the ropes right now as a consequence of what's happening. And I think it's terribly sad. One winner is J.P. Boulay, our friend, DeKalb County Superior Court judge, who's been nominated by President Trump to be a United States District Court judge in the Northern District of Georgia, and he will do an outstanding job. Both Boulay and the president are winners because of that, but unfortunately the president is a loser for the way he has treated John McCain, which has been petty and unforgivable.
Yeah, there's no defending that.
Yep.
Alexis.
Well, I'll start by adding John McCain to the list of winners who celebrated all week and showing his sense of commitment to unity and diversity, which was really very beautiful to see at the funeral in Arizona, and I'm sure we'll continue with the opposing candidates for president at his funeral service in D.C. And then the Queen of Soul has been celebrated with pink Cadillacs and music and unity and her diversity. Gold-plated coffin with a gold evening gown. So she's really going out in a wonderful way. So it'll be great when she and John McCain get together.
Well said. Phil.
Well, I will make J.P. Boulay also a winner, Carrie. I think it's very well merited, that judgeship. And also, we should take a note of another winner, Justice Harris Hines, the Chief Justice of the State Supreme Court. He did his last opinion just the other day, and we wish him well after 44 years of law. And a big loser is the Complete Street project in Atlanta. You know, we had a bond, and we also had a T-splost with millions, hundreds of millions of dollars to redo infrastructure and streets. All of that is, I wrote down only 3 out of the 15 projects have ever been done in the city of Atlanta. It's a disgrace.
We're going to make that a topic some other time, because I will tell you, driving in Atlanta is terrible. Potholes.
Yeah, in the metal, it's terrible, and they're
Potholes,
not completing these
sidewalks,
projects.
tree roots uprooting sidewalks, potholes,
a lot of work
stuff.
needs to be done, but they're doing a lot of work around the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. They're getting their streets together.
All right, I'm starting to run out of time, so I'll make college football the winner. The Falcons start next week. Atlanta United plays this afternoon against my favorite soccer player of the whole world, Wayne Rooney, who now plays in Washington, D.C. See you next week on the Georgia Gang. Go Dogs.
The opinions expressed in this broadcast are those of the panelists appearing in this program.